Hi, I'm Ron Paul. I spent 22 years as a member of Congress. Now I live more than 1,000 miles from the nation's capital. But today, I'm briefly back in Washington. I'm not here for political reasons, however. Instead, I'm here to deliver an important message to every American citizen, no matter what your political party affiliation. In short, I want to let you know that a U.S. financial crisis greater than the crisis of 2008 is fast approaching. And I'm going to explain what you can do about it personally to protect yourself and your family. I'm not talking about a political solution, but rather something you and your family can do personally to protect your wealth and your health. You see, after so many years in Washington, I thought I was immune to being shocked by what our government does. But the actions of the Fed and the last two White House administrations have gone beyond anything I could have imagined. Most Americans don't realize that in the past 6 years, we have created $4 trillion of new money literally out of thin air. At the same time, since 2006, we have literally doubled our national debt. And I've said many times over the years, prosperity cannot be created out of thin air by a central bank. So please, as a citizen of this country, pay attention to what your government is doing right now. The people running our country today are living in a fantasy world, and if you're not careful, you could be the one who pays the price. Hardly anyone is talking to the American people honestly about what is going to happen in our country. So please, hear me out. The way you live, work, travel, retire, and invest in America, everything is going to change. Some of it in ways most people do not expect. Sometime in the next few years, we will experience a new type of financial crisis. And this one will be very different from the financial crisis of 2008. Because this time, it won't be just a banking and mortgage problem, but a full-blown currency crisis. This will happen because investors around the world are catching on to the fact that the U.S. dollar is not the safe haven it once was. As a result, we are almost certain to have a major stock market crash and a currency collapse too. This will make it nearly impossible for our government to spend more money than they have, to expand the welfare state, to station our military in more than 140 countries. And when our currency collapses, nearly everything else will go with it. Stocks, bonds, commodities, you name it. When you destroy the currency, you can destroy the entire economy. You can destroy the whole nation. We're likely to see all kinds of new laws and rules about what you can do with your money, where you can put it, and where you can move it. They've been doing that since the 1970s. It's going to get worse, much worse. We're likely to have a massive inflation when the trillions and trillions of newly printed dollars begin making their way into the economy. This period is going to be particularly tough on seniors and anyone relying on fixed income or money from the government. We've also witnessed major changes to the very fabric of our society, as well as our personal liberties. Destroying a nation's money in this manner wrecks businesses, friendships, and families who simply don't understand and aren't prepared for what will happen. What our government is trying to do today has been tried many times before in dozens of places around the world. It almost always leads to disaster. I assure you, this gross experiment with our currency will soon lead to a real currency crisis right here in America, the likes of which we have never seen before. The question is not if, but when. The piling up of unfathomable debt and endless money printing is going to come to an end, and it's going to happen much sooner than most people think. For years, I've tried fighting the people behind these policies in Washington. I never voted for more debt. I tried to audit and even put an end to the Federal Reserve. I swore to uphold the Constitution. I took that oath seriously. But the truth is, no matter what's in the Constitution, Washington controls our money, and they have put us on a course for certain financial crisis. You can ignore that ugly fact, or you can take the necessary steps to protect yourself. The choice is yours. I don't work in Congress anymore, but I know for certain that you can't wait for Washington to fix these problems. Real monetary reform will come only after a major currency crisis has already done its damage. And that's what is headed our way. So you've got to take action personally. Get the facts for yourself. Learn the steps necessary. Protect yourself and your family from the next practically inevitable financial crisis. And that's why I put together this short message today. It has nothing to do with politics or fundraising. It's something you and your family can do in your own home, and it could literally save your health and your wealth. Right now, hardly anyone in Washington is talking about this situation honestly with the American people. Most Americans have absolutely no clue about exactly what is going on. But I'm hoping to change that today. I spent 22 years in Congress. I served on the House Banking Committee and the Committee on Foreign Affairs. I sponsored well over 600 legislative bills. I've met with every president of the past 40 years and every Fed chairman. I've spent thousands of hours in top-secret, closed-door meetings in Washington. And today, I'm going to show you what's really happening in our economy and with our money. I'm going to recommend a great way for you to prepare and protect yourself and your family. Most people I meet with my travels around the country correctly sense that something in our economic system is rotten, but they don't know how to explain exactly what's going on. So let's start with the facts. What we are witnessing in America today is unprecedented. Our government has embarked on a gross out-of-control experiment, expanding the money supply 400% in just the past 6 years. Do you think we are a richer country today because we now have 5 times more money in circulation than we did just 15 years ago? I sure hope you are not that naive. And since 2006, we have more than doubled our national debt. To put this in perspective, just consider, it took our nation 216 years to rack up the first $8.5 trillion in debt. Then just 8 more years to double that amount. Like I said, our government has embarked on an out-of-control experiment, printing absurd amounts of money out of thin air and borrowing so much money we can never, ever hope to legitimately pay it back to our creditors. Still, somehow, our politicians tell us things are getting better. I know many people see the recovered stock market, the rebound in real estate prices, and want to believe everything is back to normal. But I promise you, nothing is normal about what is happening in America today. It is all smoke and mirrors, the results of an out-of-control government experiment with our money supply. Governments can mislead people with all sorts of biased reports and statistics. They can even fool people for quite a long time by printing more paper money, but it's inevitable that trust in the money, something absolutely required for it to serve as a medium of exchange and to allow economic calculation, will be lost. That is exactly what is happening right now. It's going to get much, much worse, and it's going to result in another financial crisis sooner than most people think. Governments have the power to declare paper to be legal tender, but they do not have power to give that money any real value. And this is something the politicians won't tell you. Most people don't understand the difference. If you don't believe that these policies are already causing major problems, just look around at what is happening today. And please ask yourself, how can the economic situation in America be normal when roughly 75% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck with essentially zero savings? The labor force participation rate, basically the percentage of able-bodied people who are actually working, has fallen every year since 2007 and is at a lowest level since the 1970s. How can things really be normal in America when the number of people on food stamps has basically doubled since 2009 and when half of all children born today will be on food stamps at some point in their life? Yes, you read that correctly. Roughly 50% of all children born in America today will be on food stamps at some point in their lifetime. Does that sound normal to you? Can our country really be back to normal when, according to the most recent numbers from the Census Bureau, an incredible 49% of Americans are receiving benefits from at least one government program every single month? Or when 52% of all American workers make less than $30,000 a year? Can things really be normal in America when at one point a single U.S. government-controlled agency, the Federal Reserve, was purchasing up to 70% of the bonds issued by the U.S. Treasury simply by creating money out of thin air? Or when the too-big-to-fail banks that got bailed out in 2007 are actually 37% larger than they were back then? And how can things be normal when our country's money supply has increased by 400% since 2006, all just printed out of thin air? Look at this chart. It should scare the heck out of you. It shows that what has taken place over the past few years with the U.S. dollar is something straight out of Weimar Republic or the last 20 years in Zimbabwe. The point is, no one can tell you exactly when the next crisis is coming. Not me, not anyone else, but I assure you, what's going on today certainly isn't normal. And it's extremely likely going to end in a disaster. The next phase of this currency crisis will threaten our very way of life. The savings of millions could be wiped out. This disaster will change your business and your work. It will dramatically affect your savings accounts, investments, and retirement. It will change everything about your normal way of life. Where you vacation, where you send your kids or grandkids to school, how and where you shop, the way you protect your family and home. You absolutely must learn to protect yourself, and that's what I want to show you how to do today. Just remember, we as Americans are not immune to the basic laws of economics and finance. Many people in America, including almost every politician in Washington, don't understand this because they have no idea how free markets work and because the U.S. dollar has dominated the financial world for more than 50 years. But history has proven bad economic policy destroys economies. It will happen over and over again, and no policy is more dangerous than America's current monetary policy of printing trillions of dollars out of thin air and borrowing trillions more. Over the past 100 years, many other governments around the globe have tried to do exactly what our government is doing today. That is, print money in massive quantities to pay growing, insurmountable debt. It's just the past 100 years, for example, we've seen this scenario play out in Germany, Russia, Austria, Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Poland, the Ukraine, Japan, and China, just to name a few. And so far, this experiment has a perfect track record. In every case, in every instance, printing and borrowing money on such levels has always led to financial and economic crisis. This idea was even written about in the Bible in Genesis 47:15. So when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, "Give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed." Today, the very same process is well underway in the United States. The point is, I know for certain that America is in for some major changes to our economy, our country, and our very way of life over the next few years. And believe me, I'm not trying to scare you. I simply want the people of this great country to wake up, to pay attention, and to realize the logical conclusion of what our government is doing today. Today, we as a nation owe more money to more people than any nation in history. We owe more money than all of the European Union combined. And the U.S. debt per person is more than twice as much as in the EU. Now, our politicians will tell you that everything is okay. They point to a rising stock market, low inflation, recovering real estate prices, and declining unemployment and say, hey, we're back on the right track. We'll be fine. Our government would have you believe, without any proof whatsoever, that it can order the Federal Reserve to prevent interest rates from ever rising to a level that would cost the American people or the government anything. Our politicians believe, again without any proof whatsoever, that they can stimulate the economy by even more deficit spending so that it grows faster, allowing tax revenues to produce a surplus. But I'm sure you know better. You must. The only question is, will you take the necessary steps to be ready? I sure hope so. I can't tell you, after decades of grappling with the Fed officials in committee meetings and in lunches and private discussions with Fed chairmen, a lifetime of reading serious economic literature and a profound awareness of the dangers to liberty in our time, I know there is absolutely no hope for the Fed or the government to conduct responsible monetary policy. I once rode alongside President Reagan on his helicopter, Marine One, and the subject of what's happening to our money came up. Ron, the president told me, no great nation that abandoned the gold standard has remained a great nation. I've also confronted Alan Greenspan, the famous Federal Reserve chairman, on this subject, and he told me he still stands by his original thesis, which was published decades ago. He wrote, "In the absence of the gold standard, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. It's frustrating how both men knew what needed to be done but failed to take the important steps to prevent the crisis we now face today. I believe history will prove both Reagan and Greenspan to be correct, but my years of fighting in Washington are over. I don't work in Congress anymore, and I'm not making any more runs at the presidency. And so today, I'm bringing my message directly to you. The more knowledge we, the people, have, the better we can protect ourselves, and the better off our country will be. I know for certain that you can't wait for Washington to fix these problems. Like I said, real monetary reform will come only after people lose confidence in the dollar and after a major currency crisis hits. And for most Americans, that will be much, much too late. That will be only after a major stock market collapse, after the bankruptcy of many financial institutions, after many people's savings are completely wiped out. I fear there will be civil unrest, massive unemployment, a huge drop in stock prices, great destruction of wealth, the erosion of personal liberties, vicious capital controls on what you can and can't do with your money, the suppression of privacy, authoritarian clampdowns, bank and brokerage closings on a massive scale, and ultimately a major crisis as the U.S. dollar is rejected by almost any non-paper alternative. The point is, you've got to take action personally, and you have to do it now, today, while the methods of saving yourself are still cheap, easy, and legal. Get the facts for yourself. Learn the steps necessary to protect yourself and your family from America's next financial crisis.